Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Actuary Podcast. I am your host, Brock Talby, the Fantasy Football Actuary. So I know it is a Saturday episode and we go through the Thursday Night Throwback. I am going to go through the Thursday Night Throwback pretty quickly. There's not a whole lot of news to come out of that, but there is one big news item in the NFL newsstand that I want to get to as quickly as possible. So the Thursday Night Throwback. Arizona versus Seattle. Seattle came out on top this time. They split the series this year, going 1-1. Seattle takes control of the division. No real surprises here, and no super fantasy letdowns. The biggest thing to take away from this, in my opinion, is the Arizona running back split. Kenyon Drake out-touched Chase Edmonds in the game 15-6, but Edmonds out-snapped Drake 36-33. They both ended up with touchdowns. I just don't think Kenyon Drake is going to be used as any kind of workhorse back the rest of the season. I think Edmonds has proved that he is good enough to be involved, which kind of caps Drake's upside, but he appears to get most of the rushing work. Edmonds appears to get more passing work. If they both keep scoring touchdowns, then you'll be happy. But Drake's upside is definitely capped more so than what you thought it was when you drafted him in the first or second round as a workhorse back. The only big fantasy letdown from this game was probably DeAndre Hopkins. He only had 5 catches he had a few catches for like 50 yards. I forget the exact amount of catches, but he was the only disappointment, and it wasn't a super terrible game. He didn't tank your team. In non PPR, you still ended up with over 5 points. In PPR, I think you ended up with like 10 points. So, not a super bad week, but it was the worst week of all the fantasy superstars. Carlos Hyde came back from injury. Chris Carson was still out, and Carlos Hyde looked pretty good. He scored. So he had a pretty productive fantasy day. And then Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both got into the end zone to save what would have been very pedestrian numbers. Neither of them had high yardage totals. So their touchdowns definitely saved their day. But again, decent days. The quarterbacks, decent days. Um, yeah, no zeros or anything. Like I said, DeAndre Hopkins was probably the biggest disappointment, but you still have hope going into the weekend. So we'll get into the NFL newsstand, and the biggest piece of news here, Drew Brees has been placed on IR. He will miss multiple weeks, which was expected, and it was widely expected that Jameis Winston would be the starter. He came in at halftime. He played the whole second half for the injured Drew Brees last week. And then yesterday, reports come out that Taysom Hill has been taking most of the first team reps at practice, and he is expected to start. And then another report comes out that Jameis Winston isn't even expected to be involved in any kind of way on Sunday. Sean Payton came out yesterday after practice and said that he has not announced a starter, so it's still up in the air a little bit. Taysom Hill is expected to start, and this wouldn't be super big news, except for ESPN has Taysom Hill listed as a tight end and quarterback, which I did highlight in my Tuesday podcast, but I assumed that if Taysom Hill was named the starter, he would lose that tight end flag. No other season long platform is doing this. Everyone has him marked as quarterback, from Yahoo to NFL.com to Sleeper to Reality Sports Online, which I play on. Everyone has him marked as straight QB. There's no reason that I can think of that he should keep the tight end moniker. Um, of course, I tweeted at ESPN Fantasy Sports. I tweeted at Matthew Berry. I tweeted at Mike Clay. But I'm just a small time podcaster. I don't have that special blue check mark on Twitter, so I don't get any replies. The only explanations I've seen, and I've seen the ESPN people get kind of angry. Mike Clay is like super ticked off at people, which doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways, the only explanation I've seen from Matthew Berry is that this is the way ESPN's always done it. When has ESPN ever flagged a backup quarterback as a tight end, and then when he takes over as the starting quarterback role due to injury, he keeps his tight end flag? If you can point me to a different time that ESPN did that, Matthew Berry, that would be fantastic. And then Mike Clay's justification was, We look at snap count. What? Okay. First off, when the situation completely changes, historical data can become irrelevant. Snap counts for a gadget player, Taysom Hill, isn't relevant when Taysom Hill is a starting quarterback. And even beyond that, if you look at the snap counts for this season, a majority of Taysom Hill's snaps have been at the quarterback spot. He has 42 snaps at the quarterback, he has 41 snaps at the slot wide receiver, and then he has 32 snaps at the tight end position. So, good argument, Mike Clay. I don't know. And then I saw Mike Clay getting really um, emotional and saying that people were attacking him, but your platform is the only one that is messing this up. So my whole point was I went to my league. We are a one quarterback league. You have one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a flex, a tight end, one defense, and one kicker. That's your starting lineup. Having someone play two starting quarterbacks shouldn't be allowed. It's a one quarterback league. So even though, and you might say, well, ESPN's allowing it. Yeah, the site is allowing it, but ESPN's just the host of your league. They're not the rule setters of your league. You make your own rules in your own league. So just don't let Taysom Hill be played as a tight end. We took a vote, and if Taysom Hill is in fact the starting quarterback, we're not going to allow him to be played in the tight end spot. He can only be played in the quarterback spot, which makes logical sense. And even though ESPN, the host of our league, is allowing it, our league rules are not allowing it. So you could do something similar in your league. That's what I would do. If I had Taysom Hill, I had him as my second waiver priority for this week. If I had him and he was marked as the starting quarterback, I wouldn't play him at tight end just because I think that ruins the fun. I know some people don't really care. Um, but I have not seen a good logical reason why he would retain the tight end. And then I don't know why you would play him a starting quarterback in your tight end slot and have two starting quarterbacks in a single quarterback league, or even put him in your tight end slot in a two quarterback league and have three starting quarterbacks. Either way, you're kind of ruining the fun, you're ruining the league, and it's not really the rules that your league established at the beginning of the year. If you're starting an extra quarterback in one game, and it's close to the playoffs. This will decide a lot of playoffs. Um, Matchups are close. I don't see why ESPN would do this, and obviously they're not going to reply to me on Twitter because I'm too small. But there has been no good, logical, or reasonable justification for this other than ESPN's always done this, which no, they haven't. And look at the snap counts, which I did, and even so, they're irrelevant because the situation has completely changed. Historical data does not always keep its relevancy. When situation changes, as an actuary, we look at historical data a lot, but if the situation completely changes, historical data can become irrelevant, and then you can't use that data to make decisions going forward. That's simple data analytics, but nobody taught that to Mike Clay, I guess. So we will move on. I think I've made my feelings pretty clear. Um, Taysom Hill shouldn't be a tight end. Just like every other season long league, he should only be marked as quarterback. So we will keep going. The Giants, they had multiple positive COVID tests this week, so they are the most recent team to be hit by the COVID outbreak. Luckily, they are on bye, so they have time to get it under control. I assume nobody's in the facilities this week. And it seems like a lot of these bye week teams are the ones that are hit hardest with COVID, probably because they're not in the facility every day and they are out more in the public. So it makes sense that some of these players would pick up COVID if they're actually going out in public as opposed to just going and practicing every day and then going home. Myles Garrett, defensive lineman for the Browns, was placed on the COVID list and will miss Sunday's game. This definitely helps Carson Wentz and the Eagles' offense. Myles Garrett is the Browns' best player on defense. He's their biggest playmaker. They have only had, I think, one game at over 2 sacks in the last like 5 or 6 weeks, anyways. So taking Myles Garrett out just weakens their pass pressure even more. I was thinking about starting the Browns defense over the Ravens defense this week with Calais Campbell and a couple other injuries that the Ravens are dealing with. But with Myles Garrett out, it's either the Ravens' good banged up defense or the Browns' mediocre banged up defense. So I'm probably going back to the Ravens. Yeah, this sucks. Hopefully Myles Garrett can come back next week. We'll move in next to the injury update. I think the biggest injury news came out midweek. DeAndre Swift got a concussion and he is out for this week. So after one game of being named the starter, I think he got the concussion in practice, which sucks. So there was no way he could clear the concussion protocol before Sunday's game. So he is out this week. Hopefully he can get through the protocol quickly and come back next week. When he took over the official starting job last week, he was great. So this sucks for any DeAndre Swift owners who have held on to him all season, watched him kind of blossom into a good fantasy asset the last couple weeks, become the full-on starter and dominate last week, and now he's out with injury. In your crunch time for the playoff run. Danny Amendola and Kenny Golladay for the Lions are also both out. This hurts Matthew Stafford a little bit. Matthew Stafford himself is questionable. He has that partially torn ligament in his thumb. He was able to come back in last week and play the whole second half with it wrapped. It sounds like he's going to play. He still has Marvin Jones, but not having Kenny Golladay has really limited Matthew Stafford's upside all season long. Sammy Watkins is questionable. He might make his return finally. He becomes relevant just because he's on the Chiefs, and if he's Patrick Mahomes' number 2 target, I think Mecole Hardman is expected to miss, so Sammy Watkins becomes an interesting flex play. Allen Lazard is questionable after being activated from IR. I did pick up Lazard in 2 of my leagues. I would not play Lazard this week. MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, has actually looked pretty good the last few weeks, which just kind of muddies the water. If Allen Lazard had come back from injury earlier before MVS had actually looked good, I think Allen Lazard would have been just slid right back into that wide receiver 2 spot for Green Bay that he started out as. But with MVS playing well, I don't know that they necessarily do that. I think they'll keep using MVS, they'll keep using Lazard. I wouldn't play him this week just to see how he looks, but he might not have as much value as you hoped when you picked him up a couple weeks ago. Alvin Kamara returned to practice Friday after missing Wednesday and Thursday with a foot issue. This is good. He does not have an injury designation. So if Taysom Hill's the starting quarterback, at least he'll have Alvin Kamara to dump it off to and rack up those passing yards like Drew Brees does. Devontae Adams, he's been nursing an ankle injury that he sustained last week, but he returned to practice Friday and does not carry an injury designation for this week. Just like Alvin Kamara, he missed early practices. He came back yesterday, and he doesn't carry an injury designation, so hopefully he is good to go against the Colts on Sunday. Laviska Shenault is out again this week, so he's still dealing with that hamstring injury. This just keeps the other Jags wide receivers in play. Chris Conley. Obviously, DJ Chark is the number 1 there still. Calvin Ridley is expected to be back this week. This is fantastic news for both Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley fantasy owners. Drew Lock is questionable with a rib injury, but he was able to practice Thursday and Friday, so I expect him to be in. If you are starting Drew Lock, good luck. Joe Mixon is out again this week. This has just been a thing. And apparently Zach Taylor would not rule out the possibility that Joe Mixon does not come back for the rest of the season. Zach Taylor is, of course, the Bengals head coach. So him being hesitant to even say that Mixon will be back at all this year should give you concern. Gio continues to be a viable flex play in Mixon's absence. Teddy Bridgewater is hobbled, but he has not given up the idea of starting this week. Even if he starts, he will be less than full strength, and I would not start Teddy Bridgewater. And finally, Noah Fant is questionable this week. Even if he plays, I'm not starting Noah Fant. I actually dropped him in my 12-team Superflex League just because we don't have an IR slot and I have a couple injuries. I don't have room to hold Noah Fant, who's getting 18 yards a game and hasn't caught a touchdown pass since week 2. So I dropped him. I have Dallas Goedert on the roster, and I picked up Logan Thomas this week to play against Cincinnati. With Josh Allen on bye, I'm playing Alex Smith as a starting quarterback. I did pick up Taysom Hill too. So I could play Taysom Hill at quarterback, but he's thrown 18 NFL passes in his whole career. So I'm playing Alex Smith at quarterback, and I got Logan Thomas at tight end. Cincinnati's the number 2 tight end matchup. So Logan Thomas should be a good streamer, and if I got that stat going, if Thomas catches a touchdown, I'm getting double points for it. We will move into our final Saturday segment. It is Fringe Player Frenzy. So, if you're new to the podcast, this is where I talk about a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end that I like this week, that I would start this week, and someone who's usually on the fringe of should I start them, should I not start them. So, my fringe play at quarterback this week is Cam Newton. He finally threw his first touchdown pass since week 3, and he rushed in another, of course, because that is what he does. He has 9 rushing touchdowns on the year, and he's clearly the Patriots' goal line back. When they get in near the goal line, Damian Harris isn't running in the ball. It's Cam Newton running in the ball. Combine this with the juicy matchup against Houston, who just bleeds points. And my models are projecting the rare game where Cam Newton throws and rushes for some TDs. I would start Cam as a near top 5 quarterback this week over Deshaun Watson, Ben Roethlisberger, and Matt Ryan. My fringe play at running back, I am going with the New England stack here. It is Rex Burkhead. Houston has allowed the most rushing yards in the league, which makes Damian Harris a great play, obviously, which he has been the last few weeks. But I think Burkhead is also very viable here. He's currently in my standard league format, like the RB23. So he's a low end RB2 in standard league. He has 63 carries on the year and is basically 100% more involved in the passing game than Harris. Damian Harris is not involved in the passing game. So it's either going to be James White or Rex Burkhead in the passing game. And James White only has 16 carries on the year, and Burkhead has 63, which makes Burkhead a lot more versatile, and he will end up with more volume than James White just because he gets rushing work and passing work. Burkhead's got 3 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. He has 1 rushing and 2 receiving. So he has more touchdown upside than Harris, and when you add in a few carries against Houston's bad defense, it should give him a safe yardage floor, and he has more touchdown upside. He's involved in the passing game. In any kind of PPR format, I would start Burkhead as a near top 20 back this week. And even in standard leagues, I would play him over Todd Gurley, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Melvin Gordon this week. My fringe play at wide receiver is Amari Cooper. I know it's been bad with the 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks, but Andy Dalton is coming back this week, and the 1 week that he did play, he peppered Amari Cooper with targets. It was clear that Cooper was his favorite receiver as opposed to the 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks who did not really look Cooper's way. Minnesota has played better lately, but they're still not an immensely intimidating defense. So it's not like Andy Dalton's coming back and playing against some stellar shutdown defense like Pittsburgh or something like that. So my models like Cooper as a low-end wide receiver 2 due to his volume, and I think he's talented enough to hit that wide receiver 2 number. It's going to feel bad. It might feel like a wasted start, but I'm putting Amari Cooper here so that don't bench him for some random waiver wire pickup that you acquire on Sunday morning. Don't do that. Amari Cooper is good. He was fantastic to start the year with Dak. With Andy Dalton back, he should get a good amount of volume, a good number of targets. And Minnesota is not a good defense. So Cooper will be good enough. He's not going to be your wide receiver 1, but he's good enough to be your wide receiver 2. So I'm putting him here so that don't bench him for some random player that you picked up on waiver wires this weekend because you're worried about Amari Cooper and you're worried about Dallas. I'm playing Cooper as a wide receiver 2. I would start him over Robbie Anderson, Mike Williams, and DJ Moore this week. And finally, my fringe play at tight end is Hayden Hurst. Anybody I put here is going to be touchdown dependent for the most part. Tight ends, outside of Travis Kelce, have been very unreliable this season. And it's basically if you get a touchdown, you're a top 5 tight end this week. But Hurst had 4 straight games over 54 yards before the bye. He had 2 over 60, and he has 3 touchdowns on the season. New Orleans is a top matchup for tight ends, so my model likes Hurst's floor combined with a good positional matchup to result in a top 5 play this week. And I can definitely see it. New Orleans is a good matchup for tight ends. Hurst has been one of the more steady guys lately with his yardage production. Even though he hasn't found the end zone for a few weeks, he's giving you that base where he's not going to goose you. He's not going to get 0 points for you. He's not going to tank your lineup like some tight ends have been doing. I would start Hayden Hurst over TJ Hawkinson, Rob Gronkowski, and Eric Ebron this week. That will wrap up this Saturday episode. If you want to check out the website for the Week 11 modeled rankings, those are available at thefantasyfootballactuary.com, and I update those all the way until the Sunday kickoff with the most up-to-date injury news and any other kind of news that comes out. Stay tuned on my Twitter for any news on Taysom Hill. It is at the FF Actuary. I am trying to keep up to date on that. Once a starter is announced, I will be tweeting about it. And you can watch this podcast and any other podcast episode in video format on YouTube. The page is The Fantasy Football Actuary. That will conclude this Saturday episode. Hopefully, you are prepped and ready to go now for Sunday. Hopefully, you are ready to make that playoff push. If you're playing in ESPN and you're playing against Taysom Hill in a tight end slot, I am sorry. It does not seem fair. Look for a different platform. Honestly, with ESPN paywalling a bunch of the fantasy content behind ESPN Plus now, and this like archaic, we're not gonna bend because this is our site and we'll do what we want, refusing to take tight end away from Taysom Hill. I assume a lot of people are going to be mad, and I would not be surprised to see a lot of people migrating away from ESPN next year to go to any other platform. I play on Yahoo, Reality Sports, Sleeper. I've played on NFL.com. Yeah, none of those sites are this full of themselves, is what I told Mike Clay, that there's no other season-long site this full of themselves where they refuse to make a simple, logical decision. So, yep, good luck if you're on ESPN and playing against Taysom Hill. I feel for you. I will be back next Tuesday after Week 11 to recap and see how everyone did. Until then, keep crunching those numbers.